The next lightning attack particle system we're going to create is the lightning attack emitter. The emitter is actually the particle effect that's going to sit at the very end of the player's antenna and emit a small amount of particles to remind us visually of which attack we currently have queued up. If you look at the player, you'll realize that they're holding a little remote control. It's going to be the tip of this remote control that emits these little attack particles. For now though, we're going to create this as not a part of the player. I'm just going to come over to some empty area, and I'm going to create a new particle system by going to the hierarchy window and selecting Create, Particle System. I'm going to rename this particle system Lightning Attack. This will eventually be the parent object of all of my lightning attack effects and code that makes the lightning attack work. Now let's step through the particle system and see all of the properties of its modules. The lightning attack is actually very simple. A lot of this stuff is going to be left as is. For instance, this is a looping effect that should play on awake, so we'll leave those checked. Also, this effect is going to have a duration of 5 seconds. We'll change our start lifetime from 5 to 1.3, as we don't need our particles to live quite so long. We're also going to change the speed from 5 to 0.75. We don't really need them to move all that fast. We're also going to reduce the start size, as they're way too big right now. Let's change it to something like 0.21. We want these particles to have sort of a whimsical weightless effect, but we do want gravity to pull it down a little bit. So for the gravity modifier, I'm just going to set it to 0.17. I'm going to leave the simulation space as local, but I'm going to change the scaling mode to shape. Under emission, I'm going to reduce the rate because 10 is just a little too high. I'm going to change it instead to be only 5. And then for the shape, I'm going to leave it as this cone, but I'm going to reduce the angle pretty extremely. I'm going to go from 25 all the way down to 9. This is going to make it look much more like a cylinder. Then for the radius, I'm going to change it to be 0.3. I want to be able to emit from anywhere on the shell of this cone, so I'm going to change the emit from to volume shell. Now I can see my length is pretty extreme, and so I'm going to change the length to be only 0.4. I also want these particles to go in a random direction, so I'll check the random direction checkbox. Now it's worth noting that I really want these particles to emit forward and not up. As you recall, particle systems automatically come with a rotation about the x-axis, so they emit up instead of forward. I'm just going to change the rotation about the x-axis to be 0. Then, I'm going to go ahead and give it a color over lifetime. I do that by going to the plus icon in the upper right hand corner and selecting Color over Lifetime. For this color over lifetime, I can see that I can choose a gradient or a random between two gradients. I just want to make sure that I'm choosing just a single gradient. For these colors, I'm going to start with a yellow. I'm going to give it a value of 255, 255, 0. Then, about the middle, I'm going to add another color option. Here I'm going to give it a very light blue color. Next, I'm going to apply a color by speed module. In this module, my range is going to be between 0 and 1, and my color is going to go from white on the left end to yellow on the right. For yellow, I'm going to do 255, 255, 0. I'm also going to add a size over lifetime module, and with this module, I'm going to make these particles grow from 0 to 1 very quickly over their lifetime. I'll just go ahead and click on the size curve. And what I'd really like it to do is I'd like it to grow from 0 to 1. However, I don't really want this shape. In fact, I really want it to be quite the opposite shape, sort of an upward and outward curve. If I look at the presets, I can see one of those presets already exists, and so I'll click on that. Now I have the shape that I want, and we can see the particles sort of phase in from nothing and grow to their full size. At this point, the particle system for my lightning attack is done. To finish it off, I'm going to add a script to it. I'm going to do this by clicking Add Component, Scripts, and then I'm going to look for the lightning attack script. Now this script is actually going to be what controls making my attacks. This is what I set up my cooldown, my range, my damage, and my references. The values that I use for this script are a cooldown of 1, damage of 50, a range of 20, and then we have to set up our strikeable mask, meaning what exactly can we shoot? Obviously, we want to be able to shoot the shootable layer because that means we can shoot our enemies. But we also want to be able to shoot the blocking layer, meaning that our lightning will hit the environment, walls, the cars, blocks, so on and so forth. So I'm going to click on the drop down again and also choose blocking. Now we need to supply two references. The first is for a lightning bolt, which doesn't exist yet. We're actually going to create that in the next video. The other is a reference to this lightning hit, which we created in the previous section. So I'll just click and drag the lightning hit game object over to the lightning hit weapon reference. We'll notice that it's looking for the AV player script on it, so that it can play the particle effect and any audio effect that exists on it. None exist yet, but we'll add that in a later chapter. Now, my lightning attack is done. I'm going to go ahead and save it as a prefab by going to my prefabs folder, and then the VFX subfolder, and then clicking and dragging lightning attack from the hierarchy into the project window. Again, if you want to see a reference of this, you can go down to the VFX reference prefabs folder, and here you'll find lightning attack. The last thing I want to do is I want to mount this lightning attack on the player, so that in the next section, when we create our lightning bolt, we can test the whole thing out. To do this, I'm going to go back over to the boy game object. So that all of the attacks start from the same spot, I'm going to add a point on this model for them to all nest under. I'm going to do that by right-clicking on the boy game object in the hierarchy and choosing Create Empty. I'm going to rename this empty game object Antenna. Then I want to work to place this game object on the very tip of this antenna. An easy way to do this is to change from perspective mode to isometric. I can do that by looking at the scene gizmo, and underneath it, where I see the letters PERSP or PERSP, which is short for perspective, I can click on it, changing me to isometric. Then I'll align with one of the axes by clicking on that axis on the scene gizmo. Now I have a very flat, aligned view of my scene, and I can simply click and drag the game object and place it right on the tip of the antenna. I'm also going to check its front, though I will notice the enemies in the way. Let's go ahead and disable that real quick. And again, I'm just going to make sure that it's aligned with the tip of the antenna. One more time from the top, and I think we've got it. Now I'll leave isometric mode back into perspective mode, again by just clicking on the text underneath the scene gizmo. And I suppose I should turn the enemy back on. Now that I have that antenna in place, I'm going to grab my lightning attack game object in my hierarchy view and click and drag it onto the antenna. Now that the lightning attack is nested underneath the antenna, I'm just going to align it with the antenna by going to the transform component of the lightning attack, right-clicking and choosing Reset. Now we can see the particles being emitted off of the tip of the antenna. Now I'm going to hit play, and we'll see the particles are now attached to the end of the antenna. If I want to test this out and actually see the attack work, I can do that now. However, without the lightning bolt, we're going to have some errors. As long as we're aware of that, let's go ahead and try it out. If I go to the boy game object and look at the player attack script, I can see a section for the lightning attack and also a section for the number of attacks. Since I now have a lightning attack in my scene, I'm just going to click and drag it over to the lightning attack property on the player attack script and tell it I have one attack. Now I'll press play, and when I click on the enemy, I should see the enemy get attacked by lightning. Though I won't see the bolt of lightning go from the player to the enemy, I will see the lightning hit game object appear. And I do. I also see some errors, which is fine. We knew that was going to happen because we don't quite yet have a lightning bolt. However, we now know we can damage the enemy. In the next video, we're going to create the lightning bolt, which will complete this visual effect and this attack.